Welcome everyone to What the Force. I'm Marie-Claire Gould, your host, and with me today is Zoraida Córdova.
Hi, everybody. Hello.
She is the amazing author of Star Wars Galaxy's Edge, Crash of Fates. Oh my goodness. Yep. Is this is the first release for kind of the Galaxy's Edge title?
I believe so. As far as full novels, I know that there are some comic books in the work about Doc Onder. Actually, that is incorrect. A Pirate's Price, the Lou Anders book, does take place on Galaxy's Edge as well.
But it's not under the Galaxy's Edge title. Yeah. This is the first titled
official Galaxy's Edge.
I mean, now you get to wear the crown. You're the first one.
Amazing.
And then Delilah Dawson's novel comes out later on.
Yep. Stuff. Also, George Mann's novel
comes out the same day.
It comes out the same day as mine. Yeah. I just forgot his title.
And we are recording before this episode will come out, but it will come out the week of this release. So, it's Myth and Fables.
Myths and Fables, right?
Yeah. I'm very excited about that one too.
I'm very excited about it too. When we were on the panel, the Lucasfilm panel at San Diego Comic-Con, Mike Siglain, he puts up pictures of each of our books, and he put up some of the art from George Mann's book, and it looks incredible. So beautiful.
Yeah, the art and the style. I'm a huge fan of sort of unreliable narrators or legends. Legends of Luke Skywalker is one of my favorite.
I was just going to say that novels. One, yeah.
Yeah, and I actually got to speak with Ken last year about it, and there's so much depth in that, and you can, with sort of fable or mythological storytelling, it takes it almost to this fascinating meta level within this galaxy far, far away, being able to kind of tell things without necessarily saying whether they're true or not, and it adds a fabulous sort of way to express the fundamental themes of Star Wars without necessarily having to have it mean everything, where people are canon keepers and trying to prove it's right, you know? Mm-hmm. So let's talk just briefly about your personal relationship with Star Wars. What's that like?
So Star Wars, I feel has always been in my world. I feel like people ask all the time, when was your first memory of Star Wars? But I feel it's always been there. Some of my earliest memories of Star Wars was my mom came home from work one day, and one of her coworkers had this midlife crisis or something happened in his life. Sometimes I think about this man because he gave my brother and I, my brother Danny, his name is Danilo, and her coworker gave us this box of Star Wars toys, and he had been collecting these toys for ever, and we went crazy over them. I was early teens, and my brother is 5 years younger than me. So we, on top of that, we had the movies on VHS, which we watched all the time. But my uncles, I think we got into it because my uncles were really into it, and so I grew up with my mom and her brothers. And so I'm from Ecuador, and I grew up thinking up until I obviously, was old enough to comprehend things a little bit better. But before that, I used to think that R2-D2's name was Arthur because my mom would pronounce R2-D2's name as Arturito, which is the Spanish word for Arthur, which actually I felt really justified because Oscar Isaac also called him Arturito on the panel at Star Wars Celebration, which I thought was hilarious. So I felt very validated.
I didn't know he had an alternate name. That's amazing. Because you think about kind of languages and how things kind of transform because of language understanding. That's awesome.
Yeah. And it's obviously, it's a nickname, which just because of the way that it sounds. And my mom was always convinced that Ewoks were Ecuadorian because we have a curse word that the Ewoks say all the time when they're just running around they're speaking in their language. And my mom's like, oh, they're saying our curse word. And obviously it's a mistake. It's a coincidence, I should say. But those are, when you're a little kid, you just want to find any connection to Star Wars. Mm-hmm. And that was mine, a curse word. And
okay, what's the Ewok curse word?
Chucha.
Chucha.
Yeah.
All right. I'm never going to be able to watch Return of the Jedi again without thinking that the Ewoks are just running around the forest swearing.
Yeah, they're cursing in Ecuadorian Spanish. It's hilarious. So those, it's all fun memories. When I was little, my brother, when he was around 10, we used to watch the scene over and over again where they're going to get thrown into the pit, and Luke is like, Jabba, this is your last chance for your Sir Die. And my brother would act this out and jump off the couch like he was Luke Skywalker, using anything as his lightsaber.
That's so awesome. And did he pile couch cushions to Yeah. I feel like I've done this as well. Maybe not that scene, but I'm in Canada, obviously, and so we had crazy winters, and we would build Hoth in the backyard because that's what you do. When you're a kid, you're like, all the snow. Obviously, we're on Hoth. Right. The imagination goes wild.
Yeah, but I think that's what Star Wars is. Star Wars is it's about family, and it's about these little things that you surround yourself with, and memories and things like that.
Mm-hmm. Let's pivot to Crash of Fate and its place in the galaxy. High level, it takes place after The Last Jedi.
Yeah.
Yes. A couple of it has a kind of an intro scene that's long ago when they were younger, before TFA, obviously. Kind of before the problems of the galaxy took place. And it centers around two characters, Izzy and Jules. Do you want to explain it kind of in your own authory words?
Sure. So the book, the very quick pitch of the book is, it is a story about two unlikely friends who have 24 hours to complete a mission or die trying, and also fall in love in the process. And it all takes place on the planet of Batuu, at the edge of the galaxy. And it is the new world it's new Star Wars land.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And these two friends in some ways, fulfill this really interesting archetypical role for the story itself. We have Jules, who has been kind of stuck on his home world, longing for adventure, very much in some ways kind of Luke, yes. He's got that vibe, what can I do to get away from here? But he's always kind of kept back home by simple reasons, his family or his sister, or his responsibilities, or his memories of the past. And we have Izzy, who is
he's an aspiring smuggler.
I mean, I hate to say it in this way, but a female Han Solo in some ways, because
it's definitely right to say that. You're correct. Okay. That. I definitely had those two archetypes in mind when I was writing this.
I was like, this is somebody imagined
Han as a girl.
Han as a girl, and they grew up as friends, growing up as friends, and kind of always had this really close, amazing friendship. Han went off and had his adventures and then came back to Tatooine. I'm like, is this literally the story that's being told here?
It is the story that's being told here. One of the things that we wanted to do with this book is we wanted to reverse the trope.
Oh yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
So, and have it be that it's very much this girl coming back from these adventures in space or across the galaxy, the things that she's seen, the things that she's had to do. She doesn't want to be a bad person, but she wants to do whatever it takes to be like her mother, because she, her mother had a sort of terrifying presence. And she didn't know her parents. She lived with her parents, but when you're a kid, when you're a teen, you don't know your parents that well. You don't know what they did as teens. You don't know what they did in their youth. You just know them as the arbiters of your entire life. And that feeling as a teenager was really important for me to capture, especially when it comes to Izzy, because she had such a fraught relationship with her parents. And Jules, he had sort of a great hardworking family, like they were farmers, and they both have the same situation where they're both orphans, but they approach life in very different ways because Izzy is very much a cynic and Jules is very much a dreamer.
Yeah. And you also get this almost very, like parallel of yin yang almost, because like Izzy is like dark, like she's seen a lot of stuff, but she has this heart of gold, much like Han Solo. And Jules is like this like boyish light person, but has done all these like, understands the darkness in the world and is willing to go there if he needs to.
Right. But he also believes in like goodness.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Fundamentally he is a good person.
Yeah. Definitely a soft space boy.
Oh my God. He's charming and like has these really amazing moments where he's just like, I will do anything to make her happy. Like it's so good. It speaks to my like, I'm also really into Asian dramas, and it speaks to that like femme gaze, like storytelling, female power fantasy of like, hey, the guy actually like is interested in me. As from the female perspective. But what's really great about this book is that you get both perspectives back and forth between the chapters. Did you want to talk a little bit about that?
This comes for me from, I write adult romance under the name Zoe Castile. And in my romance novels, I like to go back and forth between both protagonists in the first person, because I think that, dramatic irony is really fun as a tool. But also I feel like when you're in their individual perspectives, you really get to see them as people and you get to understand what they're thinking about the other person. And the misunderstandings that can come through that should be justified, So it was really like, for me, it was really fun to write, but at the same time, it was like also complicated because of the timestamp that I was giving myself with the book. I pitched it to them as Before Sunrise meets Star Wars. I don't know who remembers that movie, but if you're of that generation.
I really appreciated how it felt like there are a couple of moments where, say, Izzy does something or Jules does something, and then the other person like reacts to it in their brain, and it still feels genuine, which is, I think, what you were really like, as you said, the complication of trying to get there is like, can the reaction, even though you can only see things from their perspective. Like one of my favorite things is like Izzy comments on how she should have done something like way sooner in the day, and this would have been all better if they had just like gotten over their own like garbage in their heads earlier on in the day. It just mwah, chef's kiss.
Yeah. So as far as structure goes, when I had the 2 points of views, I drafted a hero's journey for each of them, and figured out like, what do they want other than to kiss?
You're like, kissing is important.
Yes.
And there are some very notable ones. It was really good, but yes, continue on.
So, when the whole process was write a hero's journey outline for both of them. And that will and then figure out where it needs to be alternated. So, because I'm telling both of the stories side by side, but they're still one story. And, I think that it worked out fairly well for me as far as outlines go, because when I was writing, I could just be like, okay, now they need to do things to make each other react. And they need, and in addition to things in the galaxy sort of happening for them. But the one question that I kept coming back to while I was doing this outline is like, why even fall in love. Like all of these things are happening in the galaxy. The First Order is on their planet. Their resistance is also on the planet, and they're hidden somewhere. The people of Batuu, it's sort of a lawless city. You know, it's run by basically a mob boss, and even though there is a mob boss, there's a sense of order in the chaos, right? And for the people who live there, for the residents, everyone else is just a traveler. They're like they're passing through, and so when you're a local, you're sort of forced to choose between like, what does the First Order want and why are they here? And they're all in the background. But as these terrible things are happening in the galaxy, like, why would you choose to like open yourself up to something like love, right? As opposed to just making your money and getting off planet. And so it's sort of this idea of like, which is what Star Wars means to me. It's always like choosing like love and family and doing the good thing against impossible odds. With the outline came just reminding myself of this question. It's like, why would they choose each other instead of like their jobs?
Yeah. And I think you get at the heart of it in many moments throughout the story. There's one culminating particular fight that spoke to me really well, where kind of they both call each other on their BS, like, and they like, I would like to quote it, but again, like, this is kind of a spoiler. They do end up fighting at some point, but at one point, Jules says, "I know the galaxy will never be big enough to fill the emptiness in your heart." And then she replies and calls him on his BS. And it ends up like actually getting things off of their chests in a very like satisfactory way. Like, what are the lies that they have been telling to themselves to avoid obviously what is happening between the two of them? So good.
Thank you.
Like, it's satisfying and it fills you with a lot of understanding. And at many points during the book, I'm like, literally, is Izzy me? Like, well, like in the first like kind of modern, like normal timeline chapter, she's like, is it better to be with somebody or to be alone, like the wrong somebody, than to be alone? Like, there's these little like aside notes that feel very like, oh yeah, Zoraida gets it. She's literally had this conversation in her own head at some point. Oh my God. Because no, it speaks very much to the female psyche, and to say like, oh, okay, yeah, no, this is a conversation that, you know, women have had with themselves, and then had to confront pieces or lies that they've told themselves in an avoidance of maybe why they aren't doing something, or why they're kind of stuck in their own place, or not, you know, taking the opportunities that they should.
Right. Yeah. It was really interesting trying to get into Izzy's head, because at some points I was like, is she just being mean to Jules? And sometimes the answer was yes, but sometimes the answer was like, no, she's just being herself. And she's a very particular kind of YA heroine, because for me, I think that, you know, when you're writing young adult fiction, there's this for the last couple of years, like there's this emphasis on writing like strong female heroines. And what does that even mean? Right. Like, does it mean that she's just a man, taking on features that are traditionally associated with the masculine, right? And that's not enough. So I think that my process was trying to create a character that was like, yeah, she is a strong female heroine in all of these senses, but at the end of the day, she's still like a person who wants to find family, and find her place in the world, and that is her weakness, but it's also like the thing that will eventually make her strong, because like her strength is not just like, I can shoot a blaster. It is much more than that, or I can punch somebody in the face, you know?
Well, and like speaking from like a heroine's journey perspective, it ties closer to, like, she ties so much closer to a heroine's journey perspective than a traditional kind of, sometimes we see like male characters reskinned as females, right? Because her acknowledgement is the missing feminine in her own life, and trying to take on this very like masculine persona in the galaxy and be strong and do all these things, but never acknowledge her own emotions and feelings and wants and things like that. And her journey is internalized, and that's why it's important. It's the internal journey that she experiences that we're able to experience through the POVs in the book that shows us her growth. Her going back home literally is like her conversations with her like home and her mother, and like seeing that play out was so good. Like especially like the farm scene in particular. Yeah.
I love that scene.
Yeah. Cause she gets to like have that conversation with herself in the book, you know, and resolve those things, and then figure out what she truthfully wants as a combination of, in her own words, both the, you know, captain and the princess.
Yeah. She wants to be both. I that was like such a conscious decision, and also like there's a moment where Jules, like, also they're little kids when they're saying these things, and Jules is like, you can't be that, and she's like, why not? Like, who says? Like, how do you? And obviously we as a reader, the Star Wars reader, know that it's true. Like, you could be a general princess.
Exactly.
It's sort of like seeing how limitless we can be.
I have kind of a couple of questions about the Underworld in the galaxy, because again, we're after TLJ, and we kind of get a couple of instances of Underworld establishment. Izzy herself is a bad ass. She is amazing. She's tough. She's all those things. Literally in a bar fight, she shoots somebody. Like, boop. You know, like, you know, and obviously she has had, I think you referenced that she's had some moments where she's had to do things like that previously. She's part of a crew at the start. She experiences kind of underworld, kind of a, almost like I don't know, this is like a Deadwood reference, but like an Al Swearingen Oga. Is it Oga? Is that how you pronounce it?
Oga is she is the leader.
Yeah, like there's kind of like Batuu is kind of like Deadwood. Like
it is. Batuu is the Wild West.
Yeah, it very much feels that way, and you have kind of, in some ways, kind of these oppositional political forces that are trying to influence it, but it's got a law unto its own. What is your approach to taking on these kind of underworld ideas and how they interwove with the story and like kind of creating that atmosphere? Because again, it felt like a Western in some ways. It felt like it's like space Western. Like that's what's going on.
So when it came to Batuu, the outpost is called Black Spire. Black Spire Outpost, it is a place where you go to get lost if you're just and to start over. And there are very particular kinds of people that decide to stay on this planet. And if you decide to stay, that you are under the understanding that there is a boss on the planet, and her name is Oga Gara. And Oga, sort of like, nobody ever sees her. She's kind of like the boogeyman, right? Like, you know that she's running things. So she comes out in public, she is definitely like asserting her presence, and something bad has happened, that she's like revealing herself, because she runs everything sort of from the shadows. And when it came to sort of building that, I asked myself, like, Jules has lived on this planet for his whole life. So how does he orient himself? How does he survive, first of all, as a nice guy on this planet? Because he does get beat up ever since he was a little kid. He like got beat up and mugged and all of these things. My approach to figuring out the way that the world works is like figuring out Jules's place in it. And sort of he becomes an errand boy as a very little kid. Like he's a runner for some of the people who work there. And that's a sort of, you like ingratiate yourself, like, of course I'm going to deliver letters for, Don Corleone. Like, that means like nobody's ever going to hurt me.
Yeah, he's like plugged into the institution that way and kind of
Right.
has his own contacts and his own ability to is almost like status within the society because
Right.
yeah.
And even though he's never somebody that you're going to go to be like, oh, let's have a heist.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like when you have a neighborhood where you don't mess with people in your neighborhood. Outsiders are fine. Like, you can rob an outsider, but you're not going to rob somebody from your neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
And there are places that are like that. And I think that Batuu or the outpost, Black Spire outpost, would definitely be somewhere like that. There is very much a community
mm-hmm.
within this place. And everyone else is just sort of passersby. Like, they come in and out, and sometimes they influence the ecosystem, like the First Order and the Resistance, and other times, they just come in, get a drink at Oga's, and get some fried tip yip, and then get out.
That was amazing how you integrated kind of all of the Galaxy's Edge stuff. Like, now I haven't been able to go, but I want to so bad, and
I haven't been able to go either. Yet.
It's got like, it feels like you could be there, like, and I know that a lot of focus was like, how do things taste? How do they look? What happens with them? Like, why is blue milk, better than green milk? As just kind of like, why do people do these things? And it felt like a very lived in world.
Yeah. When it was one of the best things of like my entire career was getting this email with access to the plans of Galaxy's Edge. And you log in and it watermarks it with your name and timestamp down to the second that you opened it. So if you screenshot it, you definitely know Zoraida Córdova leaked this. Just kidding, I would never. But, it was very intimidating to open those documents. And the material, the things that the Imagineering people came up with for this world, it was just so in depth. It's, down to the outside perimeters, because one thing that I do in A Crash of Fate is I go outside of the outpost, because I think that it's really important to see what kind of if you're a small town kid, you're not going to just like hang out downtown. You're going to go get in trouble further out, right? As far as you can go, especially if you have like your speeder bike or your speeder. So I took everything that was there and I wondered what was further out and what else I could see.
Yeah.
And even though the focus is obviously the outpost, because there's so much to do there and so much to see, I got all these documents, and it was everything from like the restaurants to character sheets with like personalities. Sometimes when you're writing dialogue, I would get input of like, this character doesn't sound like this, or these are some songs that are going to be played in Galaxy's Edge. So those were really cool reference points.
Yeah.
And I got to make up my own things. So that's how you keep Star Wars growing, is you bring on different authors and everyone adds to the world and just keeps making like this galaxy that we love so much bigger.
Did you add the cenotes?
No, the cenotes were there.
Oh my goodness. I was like, that's so cool. Like, as a feel for the geology of Batuu itself, like, this means that there was water that created this, and limestone, and this particular world. It's really interesting.
Yeah, it is really. I mean, the note was that it was there, like it's a place that exists on the planet, and I think that on Galaxy's Edge you're able to see it, but as far as like the backstory behind it, I was like, okay, this is how they were created, and I just went back to like what little I knew of earth science. And try to like add some backstory to it.
You made like the best scene ever there.
That is the best scene ever. It was like, I was like,
what do you do in a cenote?
Anything?
I don't know. What do you do? I mean, cenotes are these like underground caverns that have been created by sort of water and the softer stone that have been worn away. And
so if you think of the Caribbean, the Gulf of Mexico, it's like the ground is Swiss cheese and it's just filled with beautiful crystalline water.
Mm-hmm. And people go swimming in them. You could take tour.
Mhm.
Like, so if you go to Cancun, literally you get off the
Yes.
airplane and there's like Cenote tour, like, you know, or you
Yep,
can like
absolutely.
go and find them if you know what you're doing, because you don't want to die, because you could get stuck.
That's true.
You
Yeah.
know.
You definitely want a place that has like a ladder system or something, unless you're, Daredevil and you just want to jump into it.
Or you're a local like Jules and Izzy who know where they are and
know where to go,
how to get them in there and stuff like that. But yes.
So I remember seeing the specs of the world and there was that image and I was like, I knew I would have that scene before I even wrote the book.
And it's a scene. So read it because yeah, it's a good scene. Essentially, it's a date. Like, we can just say that. That's it's a date. I mean, yes, it's beautiful. The influence of Batuu, like we kind of talked about, like it's this Wild West town or this like place on the edge, basically the frontier in many ways from a galactic perspective. And sometimes it's funny because like these places in the Star Wars galaxy end up becoming like weirdly important, like Tatooine, like, it's bright center of the galaxy. It's the planet it's furthest from. Like, why would you care about this weird planet? And it's because, obviously the Force cares, like, or the writers, right? But like, there is something about Batuu. Like, we've had this come up, and obviously they're making it important because they've made it into a place you can actually go. But from your perspective, why is Batuu important?
I think Batuu is important because I think with the galaxy, there are still people that live and species that live on the fringes. I think that with all the politics that happens in the galaxy, it's easy to forget that there are people throughout the rest of the galaxy that are trying to start new lives.
Mm-hmm.
They're just trying to make a living and they're trying to get by. And when you're having all of these, you're having the galactic wars. Star Wars translates into galaxy wars in Spanish. So side note. So when you're having all of these, like these fights and these, interactions between these two forces, who are the people that are caught in the middle? And it's always going to be the people in the fringes.
Mm-hmm.
And so no matter where you are, this fight is coming for you. And I think that's why Batuu is important, because we're at Galaxy's Edge. We're in wild space. And like you said, it's the frontier. It's like the Wild West. But no matter where you go, this fight is gonna be there. And you sort of have to pick a side. Because there are things that happen when you don't.
Yeah.
Right? Like when you're passive. And as much as we want to like make metaphors for our society today or 50 years ago or 100 years ago, that's something that is just so completely in the DNA of humanity.
And again, Star Wars is telling the one story of Star Wars, but it is a very humanistic story. It is our story. It plugs into myth and fairy tale and the stories that have been important all along the way. And as they take on, new authors and new storytellers like yourself into the storytelling structure, it feels more genuine to more and more people. And, getting caught, you live on the fringe of society, or you live on the fringe of, known space. And everyone in Batuu is either trying to escape a past or trying to leave what's currently going on. Like they're on their way out or they're on their way in, and they decide to stay for the time that they're there and be local. But even if people who are constantly on the run from the problems of the galaxy are being affected, then that means that nobody is safe in the galaxy from the Star Wars, from the Galaxy Wars, from the Galaxy Wars.
Yep, La Guerra de las Galaxias.
Exactly, because like that's the point. Is like, it's almost gotten to this point where the Star Wars, there's nobody safe from the Galaxy Wars compared to like when the start of the prequels happened where you could find pockets, like the Hutts ran this world and nobody comes out here. And, there was probably pockets of places that were safe from even the Clone Wars or from, the first rebellion that happened, in the original trilogy. There was probably pockets of safe places, but if Galaxy's Edge is one of those places that is so out there on the edge of wild space and is not safe, then nobody is safe.
Yeah.
Yeah,
absolutely. And you get to see that because when you go to Galaxy's Edge theme park, you have this interactive ride where you choose whether you're with the Resistance or with the First Order. And so like when you get there, you get to sort of see all of that happening.
That's really cool. I don't know enough about what's going on in Galaxy's Edge because I want to go and like experience it. Mm-hmm. What are you most looking forward to seeing after you've written in the world?
After I've written the book, I had to use my imagination so hard. I'm looking forward to seeing Doc Anders.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I am so excited for that.
Is that where you can buy the holocrons? Because I did.
Yeah.
Oh, I need one. I need both of them so bad.
And obviously there are parts of Galaxy's Edge that I didn't put in my book, mm-hmm. but I know that Delilah put in her book. When you read both of them, I feel like you have a very good understanding of Star Wars world.
Yeah.
And I'm excited to see Doc Anders because there's a taxidermy wampa there. And he has all of these creatures and not creatures, but like he has all of these things from like all over the galaxy, mm-hmm. and he just collects. He like collects anything that he can get his hands on that he thinks is rare. And he's in charge of the black market. So if you need anything from like getting your currency exchanged to like, I don't know, buying like the remains of Jedi bones or something, quote unquote Jedi bones, I'm sure Doc Onder will be able to procure this for you.
He's like a fixer. Like, yeah. He fixes problems. Like, oh, you got a problem, you fix it. It's like you almost have like this weird like government, quote unquote, with the setup with Oga and Doc. Like you have this like power structure where they kind of owe each other things, and it kind of keeps everybody in place. And I like that he has this thing called the Doc list that like you don't end up on that because like then you're on his list and he might disappear one day.
Yep. He'll never be seen from again.
Yes.
And another thing, I really want to go to Oga's and just because I've always wanted, like one of my favorite parts about Star Wars books when I listen to the audiobook mm-hmm. is when you get to like, oh, and then they were in a cantina because all of a sudden the music starts in the audio. And I think that the Star Wars Cantina is just such a cornerstone. It's like so iconic in all Star Wars things and movies and books. And so being able to actually go to a real one is going to be so cool. And they have everything from like non-alcoholic drinks to alcoholic drinks. And I want to get like one of those, they have a porg mug that I really want.
Well, and like you mentioned one of the drinks because I know somebody that went there and actually ordered it in it. So that's really cool. And then you also there's a thing that you bring up from it's got to mean something, and I read it very quickly, so I'm not sure if I understood exactly what it meant, but there's the golden lichen of Galaxy's Edge, and like it's even used on one of the drinks, and
yes,
Jules like rubs it all over his face at one point, and it's like the cutest scene. But like the golden lichen,
can't take him anywhere.
It's like referred to throughout the book, like it's lucky and it's evokes prosperity, and he refers to seeing the golden lichen in her eyes. So it kind of shows like this. I caught things. I don't know. Did I catch the good things?
Thank you.
I hope so. But like there's this theme of I almost took that as like that's a reflection of like how she's got a golden heart. Like Han, like she's still got that heart of gold in there, even though she's experienced kind of all this darkness. But was there something else going on with this golden lichen that I missed?
No, I think that I think that you're spot on with that interpretation. I do think so. Golden Lichen is it grows on Batuu, and Batuu is a place that was built upon ruins. So you have the famous spires, which are the remains of petrified trees. So you have petrified trees and you have ruins, and this entire civilization, this entire outpost is built on the past. So Batuu is like a reflection of the past, the present, and the future. So it's all of these things. It's possibility. It's hiding. It is like the ability to prosper, and it and also a getaway. Depending on the kind of person you are. So Batuu means different things to different people, but because it is basically like nothing is brand shiny new. Everything's repurposed. Everything can be used again. Nobody throws things away. That's why one of the biggest businesses is like there's the junkers, right? The salvage. You can salvage anything.
I love that. That felt very Star Wars-y to me. Like,
yeah. And so you have these petrified trees in ruins, and what grows on these spires is gold, dust.
Yeah.
And so I think that it's like emblematic of the world itself. It's like a diamond in the rough, right? Like, look at all this like old stuff, but also there's this thing that is shiny and pretty. And so it's like the dichotomy of what actually like what Batuu is.
Yeah.
So that's why I really wanted to keep using the golden lichen.
It was good.
Even, like,
yeah. I like, yeah. And then, of course, Jules uses it on his face, and the cutest.
She's a grubby child.
Yes. Hello, space child. Why? YA? Why YA?
Why? I am a YA writer. I love writing for teens. And I started writing when I was 13. I went to a writing program when I was 15, 16 or 16, 17. And I sent out my first book for submission when I was 17. And obviously I did not get an agent off of that because it was trash, but and it had 17 plot holes, but I tried. And then, 6 years later, I sold a book. So it took a really long time, and multiple books, but my characters were always teenagers. And I think that writing YA is twofold for me. It is full of possibility, and it is like the first time you experience something when you're in a place where you are no longer a child, but you're still yet not an adult. And there's so much possibility in that. And it's like this idea of first, like the first time you get your heart broken, the first time you like get dumped at a cantina and end up going back home to your former planet. The first time, you are completely at a loss for something to do and questioning where your place is in the galaxy. And the other thing about YA is that anything can happen that can happen in an adult novel. But I think that the difference with YA is YA has to have hope at the end of it. And so that's actually what Star Wars is.
Star Wars is YA.
Star Wars is hope. Star Wars is YA. Star Wars is hope. It's like, where's my place in this galaxy? Also, there's hope at the end. So for me, the two things just went hand in hand. And I've been writing YA for 8 years now. I do write adult romance on the side. But I think that YA is just so limitless. And I think that like teens need all kinds of stories. And you don't have to be a teenager to read YA, because YA doesn't mean that a story is more simple or dumbed down. It just means that like the story is an exploration of a first, and there is hope at the end. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
And I love your statement on it. I actually, Jon Favreau was recently interviewed about The Mandalorian, and he said, one thing George Lucas said to me was, remember, John, the real audience for all stories and all myths is kids that are coming of age, because he's really a Joseph Campbell adherent. And that's the point, right? Like, everybody goes through periods of transition in their lives where maybe it's the first time they've experienced something. And that's why having hope at the end is like a guiding light to the story is so important. It's important for us as humanity to always have hope and to never give up, to have that resilient attitude. And if it's just as simple as, you know, I have hope that things will not always be this way, you know, that there's going to be change, that things will get better. It gives people a lot of, you know, things to grasp onto. And I think that that's why YA is particularly, you know, I know tons of women that read YA all the time, and men too, because, you know, it's about a particular storytelling, and Star Wars is YA.
Yeah, absolutely. Honestly, I was really pleased by we had a signing for A Crash of Fate at San Diego Comic-Con, and it was the first time it was available to market. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the people who bought my book were men, and like young men. And I was like, more power to you. I love that so much. I think that YA has been given like a little bit of shame in our book buying, you know, trends. But I think that is really misplaced. And if you love a book, if you love a thing, like, don't be ashamed of it. Like, you love romance in Star Wars, love romance in Star Wars.
So what are your feelings on romance in Star Wars?
I think I love it. Like, I watched a lot of, I want more happy endings in Star Wars. There was a bit of a question as to how are they star-crossed lovers? No, I'm talking about Lost Stars by Claudia Gray.
Yes. So you're talking about Thane and Ciena Ree. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. Like, are they star-crossed lovers in that sense? I don't know if I have like the balls Claudia Gray has to do that.
To like not ever have them together?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's actually one of my favorite Star Wars books.
Oh, it's beautiful. Yeah.
It's absolutely one of my favorites. And Claudia is really great at like taking your heart and squeezing it in her fist and then saying like, you're welcome with her books. But so I love stories like that. I think that there should be a number of stories. Like there should be more stories because what are the things that you look for? What are the base human emotions that we feel, right? Like what keeps us going during times of turmoil, right? Like we find happiness in different places. We find love in different places. And I think that like those stories should be told, and there is room for things like that. That doesn't mean that, you know, like we're going to have, a new like line of Star Wars romances. Although if we did have a line of Star Wars romances, they know who to call.
You're like, I have already signed the NDA. Look at my portfolio.
I'm right here. Yep. We would not have the Skywalker saga without Anakin and Padme. Mm-hmm. And look at that love story. You know what I mean? Even though some cynics have different opinions.
You know, many women I've spoken to have actually said that Attack of the Clones is their favorite movie because it has the most romance in it.
Yeah.
Like, you can't deny that.
You can't deny that. I think that I think that, you know, when it came to watching them take that next step, it's always heartbreaking because like you're always rooting for them. But then, you know, nothing is going to happen because in order for us to get our current story, we have to, you know, live this past. But I think, you know, for me, romance and Star Wars does go hand in hand. And that doesn't mean that it should be like lascivious or like have a Game of Thrones level, you know, sex scenes or, you know, assault, which we do not want that in Star Wars. Do not put that in our Star Wars. But romance is different, you know, and romance doesn't always have to be physical. It can also be like just emotional
and like spiritual on some level, especially with the Force and like how people connect and interconnect and find, it's almost like pieces that have been missing for them in another person's reflection of them. Like that's kind of the point, is like what we have with Izzy and Jules is like you have the two characters who are able to reflect each other's, you know, positives and negatives and everything so that they can more clearly see each other and themselves. So good.
Yeah.
Yeah, and actually, Claudia, when she was on the show, we joked a little bit about it. She's like, I really want a fan fiction of Sienna and Thane in couples therapy after Lost Stars happen. Like, just them, like, sorting out all of their garbage and, like, putting it in order.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Like, and then you did this to me, and then you betrayed me, and then you saved my life without my permission.
How dare you save my life without my permission? Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and I think that there's a lot more room for that going forward. I really hope so, because there's something to be said from a universality perspective, especially like stories from non-North American audiences. Romance plays such a huge role in sort of the baseline cultural storytelling of, like, say, Asia or India or, you know, South America, as like just locations that are not North America. And if you want to make Star Wars more accessible to, say, audiences internationally, there is something to be said about pulling on romantic strings.
Yeah. And I think that there's like hints of it there in the new movies, but I get it. Like, it's a big story to tell.
Mm-hmm.
So
I mean, Rian Johnson said, like, the hand touch scene is the closest thing we'll get to a sex scene in Star Wars. Like,
what?
He said that.
Well, I mean, I'm fine with that, because I don't need it to be Game of Thrones, like I said. But I think there's room for that in the books.
Yeah.
You know?
There is room for that in the books. And, you know, we have more adult audience fiction, like Delilah Dawson's Phasma. Lots of stuff happens in that book that's not for younger audiences, you know, and there's a lot more potential on that.
Because I would like the movies to stay like family, you know, like it's for the family to watch. So I don't need sex scenes in Star Wars, but I definitely think we need, like, in the books, like, whatever, it's free game.
All right. So we have a very upfront advocate for our first romance novel genre Star Wars book.
I'll do it. I mean,
there is a chance that I could have a conversation with Tom from Del Rey. I'll mention that you're totally,
just be like, dear Tom.
Dear Tom, Zoraida has a good pitch for you. I mean, you become the hero of, like, literally all of the people that I know on Twitter. So
good.
That would be good. You'd have an audience.
That would be amazing. I mean, the only reason we're able to do this is because so many people read the Star Wars books.
Mm-hmm.
That, and, you know, being in the Star Wars panels is so intimidating, because, like, you just have, like, hundreds of people looking at you and, you know, wanting to hear how we're expanding this galaxy.
Yeah. And it's, as long as it ties into kind of these humanistic themes, that's what's important, right? Like, if it's telling something about ourselves fundamentally, that's what makes it Star Wars. It's set in the galaxy far, far away, but as long as you're telling something about, like, belonging, or about, you know, found family, or about love, or, you know, connecting with others, like, that's what makes a Star Wars story, right?
Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
And we get so much of that in Crash of Fate, like, especially that concept of what is home and what is belonging is so good and visceral almost throughout the book, you know, like, because it's pervasive, and it feels like it's touched on almost every chapter, like how much, like, there's this longing for, you know, what is a person's bliss in some ways, down to the fundamental questions of Star Wars, like, follow your bliss. Well, what is your bliss? It's, where do you feel like you are right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. So I hope that when everyone reads it, you know, they feel the same way. They see all of those things that you've seen.
Yeah. And I would say, like, it is very much a YA book, and, you know, things are PG, but it's still so sweet. There was a lot more angst than I was expecting. So
I mean, it's an angsty book. You're in your angsty teens.
Yeah.
I mean, they're a little older. They're 18.
Yeah.
So But they both are coming from places where like it's this emotional turmoil of you don't know where your place is in the galaxy or even on your own planet.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of that angst. I feel like they can maybe like, and I wouldn't go as far as like having Izzy have an angst club with Kylo, but
whoa. That like it no it's a total club
of Star Wars.
Kylo is like the president
of Angst Club.
President of the Angst Club. Izzy is like like she's there, she shows up occasionally, you know.
Yeah.
She like checks in to see what's up and if it's interesting, but then like you know. So I do want to mention, so sometimes, especially with good amazing ships like this, there are fanfic writers, and I know a bunch of them because, you know, I'm interested in female fandom because I'm a woman and I love fanfic. And so we were discussing before the show, we're like, we need a ship name, right? You need a ship name, and so because you are the author, I will allow you to name the ship name.
I've decided it should be Julesy.
Yeah, I love it. Because, like, you know, like the diamond in the rough kind of idea, you know? Like,
okay, I see it now.
There's still hope for both of them.
Yeah, there definitely is still hope for both of them. And you know what? I encourage people to write fan fiction all the time. I think it's great.
Yeah. And hey, if you write a fanfic based on Crash of Fate after it comes out, I'm gonna just say like at Zoraida, like you got it. And of course, when this episode comes out, I will, you know, tweet out her whole contact details. But like, I'm sure she would love to read it. Well, speaking for you, would you love to read that fanfic?
I would. You know, it would be, I think, you know, reading fanfic of the characters that you've created is always like a little weird, but I think that it's amazing that it's a conversation, like you're having an extended conversation with your readers. And I think that's super cool.
Yeah. And I mean, their story is not done yet. I'm just going to say they're just like, so there's an epilogue to this book.
The epilogue is tied into Galaxy's Edge.
Yup. And like the state of the galaxy at play.
Yeah.
That's the point.
Well, if you want another book, you should definitely tweet at Disney Books and be like, I want a sequel.
I see, like, I need them up to their heisting madness again. Like I'm literally like, where are they going to go now that this is happening? Are they going to stay and fight? Are they going to go and do other, like, whoa, very good. Yeah. So good. It's exciting. I am so happy that you had the opportunity to write this book, because I think that it's like, other than Lost Stars, obviously, like after...
That is my king.
After this kind of next phase of storytelling, because Lost Stars kind of came out beforehand and set the stage for TFA and everything like that. This is...
Yeah, it was Journey to Force Awakens.
Yeah.
Right?
This is so good and romantic and interesting and femme gaze. Like, you hit it on all the levels. So good.
Thank you.
Action adventure.
Thank you so much. I appreciate this so much.
All that stuff. Knocked it out of the park.
Thank you.
I'm so proud of that Star Wars is doing stuff that appeals to me. I'm just like no, like this is kind of a longer cultural conversation, but like I'm almost kind of sick of North American television.
Okay.
Because like romance is dead in it and happy endings are kind of dead, and it kind of makes me sad. Like, why can't we have these stories out there that, you know, make us feel good and appeal to our brains?
Appeal to everybody.
Yeah. I don't know. I want more. So get on it, Disney Press / Del Rey. I'll poke Tom at some point and be like, Tom, this was a really good book. Tom.
Both of the publishers have been really great. And I got to work with Del Rey for the the anthology
certain point
from
of
a certain
view.
point of view.
Did you want to talk about that story a little bit? Like your contribution to the certain point of view?
Sure. So my contribution to From a Certain Point of View was a story called You Owe Me a Ride, and it was about the Tonika sisters. And I really, when that opportunity came to me, I was like, where do I sign? Do you need my DNA? Do you need like a blood sample? I don't know, whatever, like control me. I mean, I'm joking, but it was definitely one of the best experiences in my career. It was different, obviously, writing the short story because I'm writing for a planet that everyone already knows so well, Tatooine. And so what we're looking for in From a Certain Point of View was like the behind the scenes, like what's happening that we're not watching in the movie, what's happening in the internal life of these characters. And when Luke and C-3PO and R2 and Obi-Wan, when they step outside of the scene, what's going on? And for me, it's, it was like two sisters on the run. They were I think in one of the Legends books, they were romantically tied to Lando and Han, which I thought was hilarious. So I definitely reference like, I've been on this ship before. So what they're trying to do is they're trying to steal the Millennium Falcon. Obviously they fail.
Yeah.
But it is like that moment of like of sisterhood and I love writing sisterhood, friendship, and romance. And so those are like my three bags. And so writing for that was a little bit different than writing for A Crush of Fate, because I'm working on a planet that no one knows yet. And so for many, my book and Delilah's book, so A Crush of Fate and Black Spire, we're going to be your first introduction to this planet. For real. So I there was a ton of pressure, but there's also a lot of fun, like getting to create side characters. Like for me, the most fun is making side characters. I love writing Jules because he's a soft space boy, but I also love writing the people around him, like who are his friends, who are his enemies on this planet. Like I asked for permission to use a specific species. The one that I really wanted to include was a Carcharodon, because I was like, my original trilogy, the first trilogy I ever published was mermaids. And there's these creatures that have shark heads. They're basically Carcharodons, but I call them something else in my other book. And when I started watching the Clone Wars and I saw it, and I was like, you never see these creatures anywhere. I have one in the book, one of my favorite characters. So
that's awesome.
So things like that. The process for writing for the short story and writing for the book was so different. But at the end of the day, I'm in the Star Wars sandbox, so it's always a good time.
Yeah, and again, you're almost like writing again the behind the scenes of people experiencing Galaxy's Edge, because it's like, like when I get there, if I ever get there, I'm going to be like, I'm in Oga's. Because I've experienced it in your book, and I'm sure Delilah will reference it in hers. Oh yeah. Right? And like plug into that. And it's like, there's so many cool things that I know now from like a story and like the larger story of Star Wars, and how this physical location that they've created ties into all of that is just so dope.
Good. I'm glad.
That's good. And also like you got to give kind of your own flavor to those things, which is great. Yeah. What are you working on next, or do you have coming out that you want people to pay attention to? Of course, check out The Mermaid. What is that? I didn't even know. You got to tell me all about it.
I have my series I have the Vicious Deep trilogy, which is about a teenage guy who discovers his mermaid lineage, and that he's grandson of the Sea King, and he takes place in Brooklyn in New York, and he goes off on a quest to become the next Sea King. And so that was the first books that I published. And what I have coming up next is I have the paperback of my witch book called Bruja Born. And it is the second book in a trilogy of witch stories. So it's three sisters. each sister gets their own book. And so the paperback comes out in October of this year. And then next year, I will be publishing a number of books. But for now, it's just A Crash of Fate and Bruja Born in October.
That's so interesting, like magic in a non like European style. That's because like that's kind of culturally in North America where we know most of the magic, but that's really cool.
Yeah, it's basically I pitched it as a Latino version of Charmed. And so what does magic look like if it is Latinx instead of European, right? So, the series is called the Brooklyn Bruja series. And I'm on book 2. Book 3 comes out next year. So I should, get to editing it.
That's awesome. I'm going to check them out.
Thank you.
It sounds awesome to hear about like the different take on kind of magic from like a different foundation. I know a little bit more about like kind of magic from a Asian perspective, but this like a very different take than like magic in Europe.
The first book in the series is called Labyrinth Lost.
Awesome. Mm-hmm. So where can people find you online if they are looking for you?
Online, my website is ZoraidaCórdova.com. You can sign up for my newsletter. I will never spam your inbox because sometimes I forget to send it, but sometimes I do giveaways and extra scenes and things like that. And my September newsletter is going to be pictures of Galaxy's Edge because I'm going to get to go. My Twitter is at @ZLikeandZoro, the phrase @ZLikeandZoro. And on Instagram, I am Zoraida Solo.
You should definitely check out Star Wars Galaxy's Edge, Crash of Fate, not only because Zoraida is just such a lovely human, but also because it is an amazing book that not only takes on like really good perspectives of both feminine and masculine, has an awesome plot that takes place, again, over 24 hours before sunrise, and is just filled to the brim with Star Wars. Like it feels like it has its own place in the galaxy. So thank you, Zoraida, for writing it, and make sure to check it out.
Thank you so much. And as we say on Batuu, rising moons.
Cheers. Thank you for listening to What the Force. I'm Marie-Claire Gould, your host. Our music is the What the Force theme, orchestral music by Christy Carew for What the Force. We have a Patreon at patreon.com/whattheforce. We would like to thank all of our patrons, especially those who love What the Force, Night Huntress in Wild Space, Susan, and Kathy. We are available on iTunes, Google Play, and all other podcatchers, including YouTube. You can connect to us on Twitter at WT Force Show, on Facebook at What the Force, and on Instagram at WT Force Podcast. Feel free to reach out to us and start a conversation. Cheers.